I was halfway down the hall when I heard my sister's laugh, bright, tinkling, the kind of sound that used to make people turn their heads and smile. Tonight, it stopped me cold. It was Christmas Eve, the house glowing in warm white lights, and my parents had just suspended my schooling until I apologized to their golden girl, Sabrina. I stood frozen beside the stair rail, my breath unsteady, as I listened to her downstairs charming our relatives with the same brilliance she'd built on stolen work, my work. And while they toasted her future with Stanford and federal grants, I was packing my entire life into cardboard boxes in my childhood bedroom. What none of them knew, not Sabrina with her honeyed lies, not my parents who worshipped her spotless image, was that I'd already said my final word. All right, just 2 syllables. Enough for them to believe they'd won. But tomorrow morning, before the sun touched the frost on our windows, every institution Sabrina had deceived would receive the evidence I had spent 6 months collecting. By the time my family opened their presents, my Georgetown transfer would be approved, my apartment ready, my scholarship confirmed. Everything Sabrina built on sand would begin to crumble. And when she finally realized what I'd done, I knew exactly what she would ask, what she always asked when her lies began to crack. Please tell me you didn't send it. And my father's smile, mid-breath, mid-gloat, would freeze as he whispered, "Send what I zipped the last duffel bag by the foot of my bed," the sound slicing through the faint music drifting up from the living room. Every ornament on the Christmas tree downstairs glittered like a reminder of a life I had spent years pretending fit me. The Hale family's perfect daughters, the shining scholar, the obedient one, the girl who stayed quiet while her sister climbed higher and higher using rungs made from my work. But tonight, packing beneath the soft glow of the old desk lamp, I felt something close to peace. My room looked different, stripped down to essentials. No framed certificates Sabrina had helped me win, no hand-me-down trophies, no shadow of my sister's reputation hanging above my bed. Just my laptop, my boxes, and the silence of a choice already made. My phone buzzed for the 4th time with a reminder, scheduled evidence delivery, 06:00 a.m. I didn't need to check it. I'd memorized every detail of the automation. 14 recipients, 3 institutions. A timeline reconstruction so airtight no one, not even Sabrina with her desperate brilliance, could argue against it. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the USB drive resting beside my pillow. Hale Original. The name I had given it when I first realized Sabrina had taken more than inspiration. She'd taken credit opportunity funding, but the data itself had always been mine. A muffled chorus of cheerful voices rose from downstairs. Someone must have suggested a toast. I recognized Uncle Jared's booming laugh, Aunt Liza's high, sweet pitch, and under it all Sabrina's voice measured perfectly, warm enough to seem sincere, modest enough to seem humble. My father adored that voice. My mother practically shaped her entire identity around it. Meanwhile, I was expected to adapt, shrink, become whatever version of myself wouldn't disrupt their glowing narrative. I opened my closet and pulled out the last box. Inside were notebooks, years of them filled with sketches of models, half-built equations, iterative tests. The building blocks of everything Sabrina had stolen. I slid a hand across the pages, feeling their weight. These notebooks were mine before Sabrina found ways to slip them into her own folders, repackaging my faith in the scientific process as her stepping stone. Once I might have cried at the thought. Tonight I simply closed the box. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. My grandmother pushed the door open gently. She'd arrived earlier that night wearing her red wool coat and a knowing expression she never explained. "You're packing?" she said, not as a question. I nodded. "Just organizing." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "You look like someone who's already left." I breathed out, slow and controlled. "I will be soon." She looked at the USB drive on my pillow, then at the packed boxes along my wall. For a moment her eyes softened with something deeper than sympathy. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "You're not wrong to choose yourself," she whispered. Downstairs, Sabrina's laugh rang out again, this time followed by applause. My grandmother and I both heard it. She shook her head as if brushing off dust. Your parents don't see what they've done, she murmured. Blindness can feel like love when you've lived with it long enough. I swallowed, not ready to discuss the ache behind her words. She hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket, a small brass key warm from her hand. She pressed it into mine. If things become heavier than you planned, she said, use this. It's the key to my private post office box. I've used it in moments when the truth became too loud. Sometimes distance is a gift. I didn't fully understand, but her tone suggested she wasn't talking about mail. Thank you, I said softly. She brushed my cheek with her thumb, then walked toward the door. When she stepped back into the hallway, light spilled in again, outlining her silhouette. You're stronger than you know, Marina, she said. And tomorrow they'll realize it too. After she left, the quiet returned. But it was different, charged with purpose. A vibration on my nightstand pulled me back. Tommy had sent a message. He'd been my closest friend since sophomore year, the only one who knew even a shadow of what I'd been dealing with. Just checking you good, I typed back, doing what I should have done years ago. He replied immediately, proud of you. But damn. Tomorrow's going to explode. I let out a breath I hadn't noticed I was holding. That was an understatement. Another message popped up. If you need a ride, a distraction, a hiding place, just say the word. I smiled. Nothing about what was coming scared me, not anymore. When you've already lived years under someone else's brilliance, reclaiming your own feels like stepping into sunlight. I walked to my desk and opened my Georgetown acceptance letter again. The university crest gleamed at the top, crisp and formal. The scholarship confirmation sat beneath it. And my transfer advisor's note, warm, encouraging, felt like a hand extended toward a life I had almost convinced myself I wasn't good enough to have. Outside my window, snow had begun to fall again, each flake glittering under the street lamp. I imagined tomorrow morning Sabrina opening her inbox, her fingers trembling as subject lines turned her world inside out, my father's face draining of color as he read words he'd never expected to see. My mother clutching Sabrina's arm, begging for explanations that finally wouldn't come. And somewhere between those moments, Marina Hale, the daughter no one thought worth noticing, would quietly walk out the front door and into the life she'd built without a shred of their support. I shut my laptop with a soft click. The decision was already made. The truth was already in motion. And for the first time in my life, the weight on my shoulders wasn't fear or competition or comparison. It was freedom. I stood at the window, fingers resting lightly on the sill. Snow drifted across the yard, the lights from our neighbors' houses twinkling in the distance. Christmas Eve had always been Sabrina's stage. Tomorrow it would become her reckoning and my rebirth. All right, I whispered into the quiet room, savoring the words that had felt like surrender to everyone else. But they weren't surrender. They were the beginning. I woke before anyone else, the house still wrapped in the last darkness of Christmas Eve, the kind of quiet that settles before a storm. A thin blue light touched the edges of my curtains, and for a moment in that half-waking haze, I almost forgot what tonight would bring. Then the hum of my laptop reminded me an automated countdown, the digital heartbeat of a truth Sabrina could no longer outrun. Somewhere in the world, 14 institutions were about to meet the real Marina Hale, not the shadow version my parents had taught me to live in. I sat up slowly and stretched, feeling the dull ache of a sleepless night coil through my muscles. I could still hear faint echoes of the party downstairs, Sabrina's laughter, our parents' proud voices drifting up the staircase like a song rehearsed too often. My suitcase sat open beside my desk, half-packed, the zipper coiled like a secret. Everything smelled of cold air and cardboard, and the citrus soap I'd used to scrub my hands after rummaging through old storage boxes last night. My fingers brushed the brass key Grandma had given me. Even without knowing its full meaning, I kept it close. I slipped into jeans and a sweater and padded down the hallway toward the attic stairs. The floor creaked in that familiar way, an old complaint I'd grown up with, but this morning it sounded different, like a warning or a permission. Cold air washed over me when I pulled the attic door open. It always did. The insulation up here was older than I was. I flicked the light on and took a breath, the room glowing in a muted yellow that never reached the corners. Boxes were stacked along the rafters, labeled in my mother's neat handwriting. Christmas ornaments, tax records, Sabrina's trophies, Marina's schoolwork rarely opened, barely remembered. A thin layer of dust drifted upward as I crossed the wooden boards. I crouched beside a box labeled Hail Family School Years and tugged at the flaps. Inside, crumbling papers and ribbons mingled in chaotic piles. I reached for a stack of science fair folders, flipping through years of competition photos and certificates. Sabrina's glossy smile appeared again and again, pinned beside judges, teachers, and reporters. My own photos were sparse, tucked between pages like afterthoughts. One document caught my eye, a project submission sheet from 8th grade, my handwriting clear across the top. Under it, crossed out in red marker, was my name, replaced with Sabrina's in my mother's script. I froze. I didn't need the memory for context. The ink itself was enough. A small, painful part of me tightened, then quieted. This wasn't news. This was history repeating itself, only now I was awake enough to see it. I kept digging until I found what I didn't know. I'd been looking for, a small, cracked plastic case. Inside was a silver USB stick with a fading label, M. Hale Prototype Models. My breath caught. I hadn't seen this drive in years. The handwriting was mine from a time when I still believed our family valued curiosity as much as perfection. I rubbed the edge of the drive, the plastic warm from my hand. Had Sabrina found this years ago? Had she copied the files? The early models that would turn into everything she claimed as her own. Behind me, floorboards groaned. I stood quickly and turned. Sabrina stood in the doorway. Her hair was immaculate, even at dawn, her silk robe tied loosely at the waist. She looked like she'd wandered in out of a magazine spread, except her eyes weren't soft. They were sharp, calculating, fixed on the USB in my hand. "Looking for treasures?" she asked lightly. "Looking for the truth," I said. Sabrina stepped forward, crossing the attic with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. She smiled, the kind of smile that fooled adults and charmed strangers. "It never fooled me, not anymore. You went digging through the past," she said. "That's always dangerous." "Funny," I murmured. I was thinking the same thing about building your future on someone else's work. Her expression flickered one heartbeat of irritation, then settled again into amused disdain. "Marina, you're exhausted. Finals research break. It's natural to feel overwhelmed, but attacking me won't fix your insecurities." I gripped the USB tighter. "You stole my work, years of it." She laughed, actually laughed, and shook her head. "Data overlaps. Models get inspired by each other. You think you invented protein mapping or environmental simulations? Get over yourself." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Timestamps don't lie. Neither does metadata. Or the fact that you logged into my campus account while you were still in Palo Alto. Her jaw tightened, but she raised a brow. "You think you can prove that I already have?" Sabrina folded her arms. "Oh, and what exactly does your little evidence bundle look like? Some screenshots? A few spreadsheets, Marina? You're sweet but naive. Do you really think anyone at Stanford is going to believe you over me?" "They won't have to believe me," I said. "They'll believe the data." Another flicker, fear this time, quick and unguarded. She recovered fast. "You're jealous," she said simply. "That's all this is. You hate that I'm the one who got noticed." "No," I said. "I hate that you never respected the effort behind the things you took." Her lips curved into a mockingly sympathetic half-smile. "Then maybe you should have worked harder. Or maybe, just maybe, you should have been a little more interesting." The words hit, but I'd been hit worse. Much worse. I stepped past her, moving toward the attic stairs. "Stay out of my room." She caught my wrist, not tightly, but firmly enough. "Marina, whatever drama you're building in your head needs to stop. Tonight, Mom and Dad want us all to be together. They're already stressed. Don't make things worse." I pulled free. I'm not the one who made things worse." Sabrina's eyes hardened, the false sisterly warmth evaporating. If you do anything to threaten my future, I swear you'll what I asked. Lie, cry, blame me until they cut off my tuition, I paused. Too late. They already did. Shock flashed across her face. Real shock. What I told them, the truth. They didn't believe me, of course. They asked me to apologize. I didn't. Her mouth opened closed, then twisted into something ugly. You always were too dramatic, and you always assumed I'd stay quiet. I brushed past her and stepped back into the hallway, leaving the attic behind. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't navigating by Sabrina's reaction. I was moving by my own. Downstairs, the house had begun to stir. The kitchen lights flipped on, faint movement traveled through the walls. I descended the staircase, the smell of cinnamon and coffee drifting through the air. My father was at the counter, scrolling his phone. My mother was arranging plates, humming carols under her breath. Neither noticed the crack in my composure. Neither noticed the storm gathering on the horizon. My father glanced up and gave a strained smile. "Morning, sweetheart." "Big day. Sabrina has her meeting with Stanford later. Very important. Try to be supportive." I almost laughed. "I'll try." My mother turned to me with a look that bordered on pity. "Marina, about last night. I hope you're ready to apologize. Sabrina told us she forgives you. She just wants harmony." Harmony. The same word they'd used for years to justify the imbalance, the silence, the erasure of anything that didn't flatter their perfect daughter. I took a mug from the cabinet and poured myself coffee. My hands didn't shake. "I'm not apologizing." My father stiffened. "Marina." "I meant what I said," I continued. "I'm done letting her take credit for my work." He set his phone down. "This jealousy is beneath you. Sabrina is your sister. Family stands together. Family protects each other," I said. "But protection isn't the same as blind loyalty." My mother's face tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said gently, "that loving someone doesn't require enabling them." Before either of them could reply, footsteps echoed from the stairs. Sabrina entered, dressed impeccably in a soft cream sweater, hair freshly curled, eyes glassy with manufactured vulnerability. She played the part flawlessly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling just enough. "I didn't want things to get this bad." My mother rushed to her, arms outstretched. "Oh, honey, you've been so strong through all of this." My father nodded, tight-lipped. "We'll get through this as a family." I stood apart from them, coffee warming my palms. Watching the scene was like observing a play I'd once auditioned for and been rejected from. I no longer wanted the role. Sabrina glanced at me over my mother's shoulder, her expression a perfect blend of sorrow and triumph. Then her phone buzzed, a sharp, insistent alert. Another and another. Her breath faltered. My father frowned. "Everything okay?" Sabrina unlocked the screen, and I saw her face drain of color. She swiped again. Her hand trembled. "Mom," she whispered, voice cracking. I don't understand." More alerts flashed. Stanford Research Integrity Office, Federal Grant Oversight, Environmental Safety Compliance Board, urgent notice, immediate action required, suspension pending review. My mother's hands flew to her mouth. My father leaned forward as if someone had punched him. Sabrina lifted her eyes to mine, horrified, pleading, betrayed by a world she thought she controlled. "What did you do?" she choked. I set my mug down quietly. "The truth," I said. I finally sent the truth. And in that instant, surrounded by garlands and twinkling lights with cinnamon in the air and snow drifting past the windows, I felt the first real breath of freedom fill my lungs. Sabrina didn't follow me at first. I made it halfway down the hall before I heard the soft thud of her slippers and the shift in her breathing, the sound she made when she was preparing to play a role. I stopped at the linen closet back straight, waiting for her mask to fully settle in place. When she finally appeared at the end of the hall, her posture was relaxed, almost amused, as if the notifications blowing up her phone downstairs were nothing but a harmless glitch. But her eyes, dilated bright with calculation, told the truth. "There you are," she said lightly. "I thought you'd try to run and hide." I turned slowly. Hiding isn't something I do anymore. She stepped closer, arms crossed as if she were the one wronged. You're being ridiculous, Marina. Overreacting. Whatever those emails are, it's probably some automated audit. They do this all the time. 14 emails from 3 federal offices, I asked. On Christmas Eve. Her jaw twitched. I walked past her to the storage room, my sanctuary when we were kids, hers when she needed somewhere to concentrate. I could still smell the lemon polish our mother used every December, the scent clinging to the wood shelves. The room was cluttered with labeled bins, broken science fair displays, old ribbons curled at the edges. The last remnants of childhood, hers and mine, laid out in silent accusation. I brushed dust from one of the bins labeled School Projects. Sabrina. Inside were neat folders, color-coded and pristine. The next bin, covered in dull gray tape, was labeled simply Marina Miscellaneous. Loose papers, notebooks, prototypes. No organization, no pride. Sabrina lingered at the doorway. Don't start digging through things that will only embarrass you. I lifted my notebook from 8th grade. A tiny diagram caught my eye, a framework for a mapping model I'd later refine in college. Sabrina's submission that year had looked strikingly similar. I turned to her. You've been using my work since long before Stanford. She rolled her eyes. You're obsessed with rewriting history. No, I said. I'm finally seeing it clearly. Her expression shifted, something sharper emerging. You think you're the victim. But the truth is you've always needed someone to blame. It's pathetic. This was her first form of control gaslighting, so smooth it could be mistaken for kindness. But I wasn't 11 anymore. I wasn't 16. And I wasn't the quiet daughter who let everyone decide her worth for her. I dug deeper into the bin until my fingers brushed a thin stack of laminated sheets. My chest tightened as I pulled them out, side-by-side displays from high school. The year Sabrina won the statewide science fair. The year I came in second. Our posters were nearly identical. Same color scheme, same methodology, same conclusion graphs. Except mine had been folded and stuffed into the bin. Hers preserved like museum art. Tell me, I said, holding up the 2 posters, which one came first? Her lips thinned. You're being dramatic. I placed both displays on the floor, aligning the edges. This graph, I said quietly, has my handwriting. You traced it. You didn't even bother to change the axis labels. She bit the inside of her cheek, something she did only when cornered. I stepped closer. You've been building your career on pieces of me for years. Why is it so hard to admit that? Because it isn't true, she snapped. But her voice cracked. When she tried to recover, her tone dropped into something darker. Even if someone believed you, which they won't, what difference would it make? I'm the one with the fellowship. The one Stanford wants. The one with the future. She gestured around us. You're a backup plan. A maybe. I didn't flinch. And yet you needed my work to get there. Her face flushed. I refined your work. I perfected it. You stole it, I corrected. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Do you want to know what I think? She said, suddenly stepping into my space. You're jealous because you've never been chosen. Not by teachers, not by parents, not by anyone who actually matters. And now you think exposing me will make people finally look at you. I let her words hang between us, absorbing them without letting them pierce. Because I finally understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. She wasn't strong. She was terrified. Terrified someone might discover that beneath the flawless grades, glowing recommendations, and polished brilliance was a hollow space filled with stolen parts. You're wrong, I said quietly. I don't need people to look at me. I just need them to stop looking at a lie. Her breath hitched. I reached for another box, this one heavier, the cardboard bowing. Inside, stacked in chaotic layers, were the prototypes I'd built during my sophomore year algorithm flowcharts, early drafts of models I'd later refine into published research. The same models Sabrina had referenced in her Stanford grant proposal. Sabrina's voice faltered. You shouldn't have kept all of that. Why not? I asked, lifting a folder where my initials were faded but legible. It's mine. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Marina, stop. You're ruining your own life, maybe I said, but I'm saving my integrity. The shift in her expression was immediate. For the first time, true fear flickered through her eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of being seen without the persona she'd spent years perfecting. You think Stanford cares about your integrity, she said bitterly. They care about results, impact, brilliance. I gave them what they needed. You gave them fabricated work, I replied, and they're about to see that. She blinked, stunned. You actually sent something everything. Her mouth parted, her breath came out shaky. Everything, I nodded. The color drained from her cheeks. You don't understand what you've done. I understand exactly, I said. No, she insisted, stepping back. You can't undo this. Once they investigate if they think I falsified data. Her voice thinned into panic. They'll take everything. You took everything first, I said softly. I'm just returning things to where they belong. Her expression fractured rage, layered over fear, layered over the faintest crack of something resembling remorse. You think you're the hero, she spat. You think this makes you righteous. No, I replied. It makes me honest. She stumbled a step back and braced herself against a shelf. If Stanford audits my work, they'll look at all my past submissions, every award, every publication. I said nothing. Her hands shook. They'll know how many people I borrowed from. I finished the sentence for her. Stole from? She squeezed her eyes shut. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, I said. You just didn't think you needed to be honest, not when everyone handed you the world without asking for proof. She stared at me for a long time, her chest rising and falling too fast. You're going to destroy this family, she whispered. I met her gaze steady. The truth isn't what destroys families. Lies do. She swallowed hard. If you wanted to hurt me, congratulations. You succeeded. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said. I did it because integrity matters. Because my work matters. Because I matter. Those last 3 words hit her like a blow. She flinched. I stepped past her again, heading toward the door. You asked me yesterday if I could apologize, I said quietly. I'm done apologizing for existing. Sabrina didn't follow. She stood frozen among the relics of our childhood, the posters, the notebooks, the faded ribbons surrounded by proof that everything she'd built was made from pieces she'd taken without permission. But as I reached the top of the stairs, I heard her voice small and breaking. What am I supposed to do now? I paused, hand resting on the railing. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her, the girl molded into a symbol before she learned how to be a person the daughter fed on praise. Instead of accountability, the sister taught she could take from others without consequence. But then I remembered all the nights I'd watched her walk across stages holding certificates for work she didn't understand. All the times she'd looked at me with pity when our parents compared us. All the years she'd let me believe I was less. Without turning around, I answered her. Tell the truth, I said. For once. I descended the stairs before she could respond. Behind me, a box shifted, something thudded softly, and Sabrina let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. But I didn't look back. Some storms don't need to be witnessed to be real. Every Christmas Eve of my childhood had smelled like cinnamon pine, and something that resembled comfort, something borrowed, something artificial but warm enough to pass for love. This one felt different. The moment I stepped into the dining room, the warmth hit me like a wave I no longer belonged to. Candles flickered beside carefully polished silverware relatives clustered around the long mahogany table, and in the center of it all was Sabrina, radiant in soft winter gold, looking every bit the Hale family miracle. Her laugh rose above the clinking glasses, exquisite and effortless, weaving itself into the glow of the evening, like she'd choreographed the whole performance. And as always, they adored her for it. When I slipped into the room, A cousin brushed past me to refill Sabrina's water before touching my shoulder in an absent half-greeting. "Hey, Marina," she murmured, already facing away. Someone else passed me by to ask Sabrina about her Stanford breakthrough. My uncle stood toasting her brilliant future while the rest of the table beamed like proud spectators. My name wasn't mentioned, not even in passing. I took a seat at the far end of the table, partly in shadow, partly out of habit. I'd always belonged to the quiet corners of Hale gatherings. Something small, something polite, something that didn't disrupt the orbit around Sabrina's star. But tonight the isolation didn't sting. Tonight it clarified everything. My father lifted his glass. To Sabrina, he said, voice thick with pride, "Our shining hope, our Stanford girl." Everyone clapped. My mother added, "And her incredible research in environmental analytics. She might be the one to change the world." Sabrina lowered her gaze in modest acknowledgement, tucking a curl behind her ear. Her performance was impeccable. If I didn't know the truth behind her models, even I might have been fooled again. What I didn't expect was for my grandmother to look down the table and meet my eyes, her expression unreadable. Not pity, not pride. Something else, awareness. The applause faded. The soup was ladled out. Conversations resumed. Across the table, my cousin leaned toward Sabrina wide-eyed. "I heard you're being reviewed for a federal research fellowship." "Is that true?" Sabrina smiled demurely. "Possibly. Nothing official yet." My father practically glowed. "She's always been exceptional. Even when she was little, she had a natural talent. We just nurtured it." A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Instead, I let my spoon swirl lazily in my bowl. "You're quiet tonight," Aunt Liza said gently, turning to me. Before I could answer, my mother cut in. "She's tired. Finals were overwhelming." Aunt Liza nodded kindly, distracted before her attention drifted back toward Sabrina. It was always like that, my story, edited, polished, repackaged, so I never disrupted Sabrina's narrative. Halfway through dinner, an aunt began reminiscing. "Remember when Sabrina won the statewide science fair? That was the year we realized she was extraordinary." My uncle laughed. "And Marina followed in her footsteps a bit, didn't you, sweetheart?" I smiled politely. "I placed second." "Oh, right," he said lightly. "Still good." He said it the way someone praises a child for tying their shoes. Sabrina leaned forward, eyes glowing with sympathetic superiority. "Marina did great. Really, not everyone finds their voice early." My fork paused midair. She offered me that sugar-sweet smile that masked condescension so smoothly, only people who'd lived under it for 2 decades could detect it. Across the table, my grandmother spoke quietly, her voice cutting through the noise. Not every voice is allowed to be heard early. A hush fell for half a second before conversation resumed, but her words lingered between us, suspended in the air like frost. My mother eventually stood. "Before dessert, I'd like to share something wonderful about Sabrina's work," she said proudly, gesturing to my sister as if unveiling an exhibit. I knew the speech. I'd heard variations of it for years. Tonight she added a flourish. "Sabrina's models are being considered for an environmental safety initiative. Her algorithm is innovative. No one has ever seen structure like this at her level." I pressed my fingertips against the tablecloth to steady myself. They were praising work created from my notebooks, from my sleepless nights, from my calculations and simulations. They were praising theft, and none of them knew. My father lifted his glass again. "Let's toast to a future where Sabrina leads the next generation of research." We couldn't be prouder. My family cheered. I stood. The room fell silent. Forks, mid-air conversations abruptly cut short. Even Sabrina's smile froze. "I'd like to say something," I said. Sabrina's eyes narrowed just slightly, a flicker of warning. My father frowned. "Marina, this isn't the time." "It has everything to do with the time," I said calmly. The table settled into a stiff, uneasy quiet. I pulled a small folder from my bag and placed it on the tablecloth. "Sabrina's research," I began, "is identical to models I wrote 6 months ago." The silence deepened. Someone gasped softly. Sabrina didn't breathe. I have timestamps, I continued. Version logs, comparative analyses, metadata. She accessed my work without my permission. My uncle blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying, I replied, that she stole it. My mother stood abruptly, shock on her face. Marina, apologize right now. She did, Sabrina said softly, voice trembling perfectly. She's stressed. She said some things earlier. I told her I forgave her, but no, I cut in. Stop. You don't get to rewrite my words. Her eyes glistened with tears, beautiful, misplaced, manipulative. I don't understand why you're doing this, she whispered. You know I love you. That's enough, my father snapped. Marina, do not humiliate your sister on Christmas Eve. Humiliate her. The irony nearly made me laugh. Dad, I'm telling the truth, I said quietly. Look at the evidence. He slammed his hand on the table. Evidence. You call this jealousy. Evidence Sabrina has worked harder than anyone. She's earned everything. The words should have hurt. They didn't. Dad, I said steady and slow, I'm not jealous. I'm done being silent. My mother stepped forward, voice trembling. You will apologize to Sabrina. Now, or we cut your support. All of it. The ultimatum they had prepared long before I stood up tonight. The one they believed would bring me to my knees. Suddenly, every Christmas I'd spent in this house crystallized the comparisons, the dismissals, the quiet corrections, the way my successes were framed as footnotes while Sabrina's were engraved in gold. I looked around the room. Some relatives avoided my gaze. Others stared at the folder, at the bolded timestamps, at the stark reality they didn't want to acknowledge. Sabrina held my eyes, silently begging me to step back into the role she needed me to play. The obedient sister. The quiet one. The forgettable one. I smiled gently. All right, I said. Shock rippled across the table. My father exhaled in relief. My mother touched her chest. Sabrina let out a small, shaky breath, misinterpreting my tone entirely. They thought I had surrendered. They didn't understand those two words meant something very different this time. My grandmother's gaze sharpened in recognition. She saw me, truly saw me, and though she didn't speak, there was something in her eyes that said, "So it begins." Dessert resumed. Conversations restarted. Everyone pretended the moment hadn't happened. But an undercurrent had shifted, deep, slow, irreversible. I excused myself before the pie was cut. The cold air slapped my skin the moment I stepped outside. Snowflakes drifted onto the porch, settling on my sleeves, melting into tiny drops. The world beyond the window was soft and still, in a way the house behind me had never been. I slipped my phone from my pocket, the screen lighting my face. At the top sat the message I'd left unsent last night. Scheduled 06:00 a.m. tomorrow. I typed one line beneath it. Let the truth speak for itself. I hit send not to the institutions but to myself as a quiet promise. Inside, Sabrina's laughter rose again, the sound polished and hollow. A perfect echo. A perfect lie. Tomorrow morning that echo would shatter. And when it did, I planned to be long gone. I woke before dawn, long before the automated emails were set to launch, long before the house stirred with the carefully curated warmth my parents loved displaying on Christmas morning. My window glowed faintly with the reflection of snowfall, soft and silver. Outside the world felt untouched, clean, honest. Inside, everything I had lived with for 21 years was cracking down the middle. I swung my legs out of bed, the floor cold beneath my feet. My room was half empty already, boxes stacked neatly near the door, my suitcase zipped except for the front pocket where my Georgetown letter rested. Even in the dim light, it gleamed like a quiet rebellion. I traced a finger along the embossed crest and let my pulse steady. Today was the day everything changed. Downstairs, the heating unit hummed softly. A floorboard creaked. My parents' voices murmured faintly from their bedroom, calm, unaware, still believing the performance Sabrina had given them last night. I slipped silently into the hallway and padded toward the staircase, one hand skimming the railing out of habit. Halfway down, soft footsteps came from behind me. Couldn't sleep either. Sabrina's voice floated down the stairs, deceptively light. When I turned, she stood at the top step wrapped in her ivory robe, hair brushed into soft waves. She looked like a porcelain doll placed too close to a fireplace, beautiful, fragile, and one spark away from cracking. "I slept fine," I said. She descended the steps, slowly measuring each one as though calculating the angle of her entrance. "You seemed tense during dinner." I kept my expression neutral. "Dinner was what it always is." "And what is that?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "An audition taped for an audience who only wants one of us to succeed." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile she wore when she wanted control without confrontation. "Marina, if you're still upset about last night, just say it. I won't be angry." "You aren't angry now?" I asked. She paused. Her lashes lowered. "I'm worried. Stanford is everything I've worked for. I can't afford distractions or drama." "Truth isn't drama, Sabrina." She stiffened. I continued down the stairs. She followed silently until we reached the bottom landing, where a tray had been set out with pastries, cinnamon rolls, and 2 mugs my mother's morning ritual. Someone had sprinkled powdered sugar over everything, as if the right aesthetics could make any reality beautiful. Sabrina leaned against the kitchen doorway. "You know," she said softly, "it doesn't have to go this way." I opened the fridge and retrieved the milk. "What way?" "This," she said. "Us fighting. You trying to sabotage things." Her voice faltered before she added, "You could still delete whatever you think you've done." The phrasing wasn't accidental. "Whatever you think you've done." Deflection masked as concern. "You're not fooling me," I said, pouring milk into my coffee. "I'm not trying to fool you," she insisted, quickly stepping closer. "I'm trying to help you." "Help me," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "If you make a mistake now, it'll follow you forever. Institutions talk, you know that. If you accuse me of fraud, especially publicly, it'll reflect on you. People will think you're unstable or vindictive." I set the mug down. "You mean like the way you told our parents last night?" She winced. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered. "I just panicked." The silence between us stretched thin. I met her eyes. "You stole my work." She swallowed hard. "Marina, research overlaps." "Ideas don't," I said sharply, and the word carried a weight neither of us expected. "Don't pretend you don't know what you took." Her throat bobbed. Her eyes glistened not with remorse, but with fear. Genuine fear. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. "We're sisters," she said finally. "Why would you do this to me?" My stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with the ache of hearing a question framed to make me the villain. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm standing up for myself." "You're ruining my life," she whispered. "You ruined mine first." The words were quiet, but they hit harder than either of us expected. Sabrina took a step back as if the truth had weight. Before she could respond, my father's voice boomed from the hallway. "Girls, you're up early." Sabrina straightened instantly. Her mask slid back into place with practiced ease. She even dabbed at the corners of her eyes to make herself look wounded but brave. By the time my father walked into the room, she was the very image of poise. "Morning, Dad," she said softly. He kissed her forehead first, always first. Then he turned to me with an expression that hovered between caution and irritation. "Marina," he said slowly, "I trust you're ready to put last night behind us." There it was, the expectation of silence disguised as reconciliation. "I'm ready," I said. His shoulders relaxed. "Good. But not in the way you think." He blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, the first vibration rattled across the countertop, then another, then a third. Sabrina's phone lit up face down on the marble. She froze. The screen buzzed again and again and again, an avalanche of notifications pouring in within seconds, far too many to ignore. My father frowned and reached for it, turning the screen toward himself. His expression drained. "What is this?" he muttered. Sabrina snatched the phone away, but it was too late. I watched her eyes scan the first subject line. Stanford Research Integrity Office immediate review required. Her breath stuttered. Another notification flashed. Federal Grant Office Data Conflict Investigation. Her hand shook. My father reached for her elbow. Sweetheart, what a third email came in with a shrill ding. Environmental Compliance Board. Urgent notice potential misattribution of research data. Sabrina's knees buckled slightly. Marina, my father demanded, voice sharp. What did you do? The question should have frightened me. It didn't. I told the truth, I said. A new sound joined the chorus, my mother's hurried footsteps. She entered wearing her robe and a frantic expression. What's happening? Sabrina looked up, eyes wide, voice trembling. Mom? They're reviewing my work. My mother grabbed her hand. Reviewing? Why, for what? My father turned toward me with a cold fury I had never seen this raw. Did you send something, he asked. Did you create some kind of fake report? There's nothing fake about it, I replied. You need to retract it, he snapped. Now, I'm not retracting the truth. You're jealous, he said. That's all this is. No, I said calmly. I'm done being erased. My mother's voice rose. Sabrina worked hard. You can't just take her future from her. I tilted my head. You mean the future built on my data? My father's jaw tightened until it trembled. He looked at Sabrina, searching her face for reassurance, for denial, for anything that would restore the world he understood. But Sabrina couldn't speak. Not when the next email arrived with a piercing alert. Stanford Administrative Board, provisional suspension of fellowship. Her breath hitched in a broken, panicked gasp. No, she whispered. No, no, no. My father grabbed the phone, reading aloud as if forcing the universe to obey him. Review pending. Integrity violation. Data origin dispute. Potential breach of ethics. His voice cracked. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. This is a mistake. A glitch. Sabrina, tell them it's a mistake. Sabrina looked at me instead. A raw, fragile fear flickered there, stripped of arrogance, stripped of entitlement. For the first time, I saw the real girl beneath the golden image. Young, terrified, human. Please, she whispered, tears forming. Please tell me you didn't send it. My father's jaw dropped. Send what? The question hung in the room like a blade. I lifted my chin. The evidence, I said. All of it. The air went still. The house quieted. The snow outside seemed to pause mid-fall. My father stared at me as if seeing a stranger. What have you done? I stepped back from the counter, the mug still warm in my hands. What I had to, I said. Sabrina let out a soft, fractured cry. My mother covered her mouth. My father exhaled something between disbelief and rage, but I felt steady, clear, alive. The truth that had lived in shadows my entire life had finally stepped into the light. And so had I. Sabrina stared at her phone like it was a grenade someone had pulled the pin from but forced her to hold anyway. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her hands trembling, each new notification slicing through the quiet kitchen like a blade. My parents hovered beside her, two pillars beginning to crack, while I stood a few feet away, coffee cooling in my palms. The moment felt suspended in amber, a single fragile second before the world began to collapse around them. Then the next email landed. A piercing chime. Stanford Office of Academic Ethics, immediate response requested. Sabrina let out a helpless, strangled sound. My mother reached for her, but Sabrina jerked away, eyes flashing in panic. I don't understand, she whispered, voice breaking. This can't be real. They wouldn't just suspend me without her sentence dissolved into another gasp as more messages flooded in. My father snatched the phone from her trembling fingers, hands rigid, face draining of color. His voice rumbled low. This is a mistake, a system mistake. There's no way. I stepped forward. It's not a mistake. He looked at me, then really looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and fury. You sent something. You did something. I sent the truth, I said. The work is mine. The data is mine. The models are mine. Sabrina shook her head violently. Stop. Just stop. You're trying to ruin my life. I held her gaze. No, I'm ending a lie. My father exploded. You had no right. Do you have any idea what you've done to your sister? To this family? My mother clung to Sabrina, stroking her hair, as if comforting a child after a nightmare. We can fix this, she said shakily. We'll call the offices, we'll explain. You can't fix this, I said quietly. My mother's head snapped up. We can. You will help us. You can write an email saying you misunderstood, I'm not lying for her anymore. Sabrina flinched as though struck. My father pointed a trembling finger at me. You always envied her, always resented her. That's what this is. You think this is envy, I whispered. He stepped toward me, towering, furious. What else would it be? She's everything you wanted to be. I didn't move. She's everything you decided I could never be. The silence that followed was painful. My mother inhaled sharply, as if I'd crossed a line she didn't even know existed. My father opened his mouth, searching for some rebuttal, some dismissal, but another chime cut through the moment. This one louder, urgent. Sabrina's phone lit up with something different. A call. From Stanford. My father's voice wavered. You need to answer that. Sabrina shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. I can't answer it, he shouted. Her fingers fumbled with the screen before she finally pressed accept and lifted the phone with trembling hands. Hello, she whispered. A faint, clipped voice answered, professional, emotionless. Even from several feet away, I could hear the tone. This wasn't a courtesy call. This was a warning bell. My parents leaned closer, straining to hear. Sabrina swallowed hard. Yes, I understand. No, I didn't submit anything unauthorized. No, I wasn't aware. Her voice grew smaller with each sentence. My sister. No, I didn't know she. Her eyes flicked to me, wild and defiant and terrified all at once. No, she whispered. I can't speak on that without a lawyer. A beat of silence. Then you're suspending me, she choked out. Effective immediately. My mother gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Oh God, Sabrina, whispered voice splintering. Please, please don't do this. I didn't know, I can fix it. I swear I'll fix it. The voice on the other end remained unmovable. Finally, the call ended. Sabrina didn't lower the phone. Her arm simply fell limp at her side, the device dangling loosely from her fingers. Her knees buckled and she collapsed against the kitchen island, sobbing into her hands. My mother rushed to her. My father stared at me with something close to hatred. This is your fault, he hissed. You've destroyed her career. No, I said softly. She destroyed it when she stole my work. My father stepped closer. You will retract everything. I won't. You will. You can't force me to lie, I said. His voice shook with rage. You think you're righteous? You think you're some kind of martyr? Let me tell you something, life isn't fair. People get ahead however they can. I met his stare, even if it means stealing from your own sister. He faltered, but only for a second. She had opportunities. She took them. You should be proud of her. Proud. The word echoed inside me like an insult. Dad, I said, voice steady. You've been proud of her for achievements that were never hers. My mother rounded on me, eyes blazing through her tears. Enough, Marina. Enough. Sabrina is devastated. She could lose everything. She should have thought about that before taking my work. She didn't take anything, my mother cried. She just refined it. Refining isn't copying, I said softly. Copying isn't inspiration. Inspiration isn't theft. Theft is theft. My father struck the counter with his palm, the sound sharp and violent. Retract it, he roared. Retract it now, or you are no longer welcome in this house. The threat should have hurt. It didn't. I'd already packed my room. already secured my scholarship, already planned my departure. I'm leaving today, I said. With or without your blessing. My mother's voice cracked. Where will you go, Georgetown? Their stunned silence was almost comical. You got in, my father whispered, brows knitting in disbelief. Yes, I said. Months ago. But he shook his head. You're not. Marina Georgetown is extremely competitive. I'm aware, I said. I earned it. Sabrina hiccuped a sob. No, this isn't happening. You can't just walk away and ruin my life. I didn't ruin anything, I said quietly. The truth did. My father stared at the floor chest, rising and falling rapidly. My mother leaned against the counter, blinking back tears. Sabrina kept sobbing small, sharp sounds that echoed the cracks forming in her world. Then another phone began ringing. My father's. He glanced at the caller ID. His eyes widened. It's the agency handling Sabrina's federal grant application, he whispered. He answered. I didn't need to hear the words. His expression told me enough. Something had escalated, something big. He froze, his face drained white. He turned slowly toward Sabrina, not toward me, and said the words that would become a permanent fracture in our family history. They're opening a misconduct investigation. Sabrina let out a scream, raw, primal, terrified, and collapsed to her knees. My mother held her. My father's breath came out in ragged bursts. I set my coffee mug in the sink. Then I turned and walked upstairs. With each step, a quiet truth settled deeper into my bones. I wasn't responsible for this collapse. I wasn't responsible for their blindness. I wasn't responsible for Sabrina's choices. I was simply the first person in our family to stop pretending. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and let the morning silence envelop me. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, the truth was finally doing what it had always promised, setting me free. I locked my bedroom door behind me, but it did nothing to silence the chaos swelling downstairs. Even through the floorboards, I could hear the muffled storm, my mother crying, my father pacing Sabrina, unraveling in panicked sobs, as the consequences she'd never imagined began to coil around her. For a moment, I simply stood there, letting my breathing steady. The room looked strangely bare now, half-packed boxes forming uneven towers around me. My suitcase lay open, filled with clothes folded carefully the night before. Quiet proof I had known exactly how this morning would go. I crossed to my desk and opened my laptop. The automated confirmation messages glowed in my inbox, each one crisp and professional, delivery successful. Evidence received. 14 institutions. 14 acknowledgements. No turning back. But I didn't want to turn back. I clicked the folder labeled Archive. Hale. Inside were copies of everything I'd sent, data logs, version histories, downloadable attachments, annotated comparisons. Not just for the project Sabrina stole most recently, but for every instance I'd uncovered during the last 6 months. Still, there was one more set of files I needed before I walked out of this house forever. I pulled out the old USB from my drawer, a small scratched silver drive labeled in my handwriting years ago, Ems Hale, early models. The same drive I'd found in the attic, the same one that proved Sabrina had been taking pieces of my work long before college. I hesitated only once before plugging it in. A small window popped up. Last accessed October 14, 2017, 11:22 p.m. The breath left my lungs. That was Sabrina's handwriting on the attic folder. That was Sabrina's late-night routine in high school, back when she pulled all-nighters to perfect projects that always had my fingerprints beneath her polish. I opened the drive. There they were, my original mapping sequences, my handwritten notes scanned into PDF files. My early algorithm models, rough but brilliant in the way unpolished things are before they're stolen. My stomach twisted, not in anger but in something old and raw, a kind of mourning for the version of myself who had never asked why her sister suddenly excelled. A soft knock cut through my thoughts. I stiffened. "What do you want? It's me," a quiet voice answered. "My grandmother." I unlocked the door. She stepped inside, wrapped in her wool cardigan, hair still pinned neatly from the night before. She looked around the room slowly, her gaze falling on the half-packed boxes, the stack of documents on my desk, the Georgetown letter pinned beneath my lamp. "Your parents are in pieces downstairs," she said. I nodded. "I know. They're blaming you, of course." I didn't flinch. "Of course." Grandma sighed and lowered herself into the chair beside my desk. "Sabrina is screaming. Your mother's crying. Your father has called 3 people already. They're trying to make sense of a truth that doesn't flatter them." I sat on the edge of my bed, fingers interlaced. "They never believed me," I said softly. "Not once." "No," she said, meeting my eyes. "Because believing you required admitting their favorite child wasn't perfect, and that they had punished the wrong daughter for years." Silence swelled between us. Then Grandma reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out the small brass key she'd given me last night. "You kept it," she said with a small smile. I didn't know what it meant. "Freedom," she said simply. "It's a key to freedom." My brows furrowed. Freedom from what? She clasped my hand around the key. From carrying people who were never willing to carry you back. I looked at her. Then, not at the grandmother who baked holiday cookies or knit scarves, but the woman whose eyes had always seen more than she spoke aloud. "You knew," I whispered. I suspected she corrected. "I saw how your parents praised Sabrina like she'd invented sunlight, and how they overlooked you even when you brought the stars into the room." The words hit something deep in my chest, something I had kept locked away for years. "I'm sorry," she added quietly. I should have spoken up earlier. It wouldn't have changed anything I said. "No," she admitted. "But it would have changed how alone you felt." Emotion pricked behind my eyes. I blinked it back. Downstairs a door slammed, and Sabrina's voice rose in a harsh shout. Grandma glanced toward the noise but didn't move. "They are losing control," she said, "because for the first time they can't shape the narrative." I nodded. "I'm leaving today." "I know," she said. "And you should." I swallowed. "They're going to hate me." "No," she said. "They're going to understand you late. But they will understand." A long pause, gentle but heavy. "Walk me through it," Grandma said. "What exactly did you send?" I pushed my laptop toward her and opened the summary document. She read slowly, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock to something close to admiration. "My God," she whispered. "This is meticulous. I needed it to be." My voice wavered. "Sabrina always said no one would believe me." Grandma's jaw set. "People believe the truth when you present it boldly enough." She reached out and stroked my hair like she used to when I was small. "You've become so strong, Marina." The praise felt foreign, too warm, too sincere, but I let myself absorb it. Another knock jolted us both. Sabrina's voice shook through the wood. Marina opened the door. Grandma frowned. "Do you want me to send her away?" I shook my head. "I should face her." Grandma squeezed my hand, then stood and moved aside as I opened the door. Sabrina stood there, mascara-smudged hair, wild breath trembling. But her eyes burned with something fierce and wounded. "You need to fix this," she said immediately. "I can't." "You won't," she snapped. "No," I said, "I won't." She shoved her phone into my hand. Notifications still cascaded down the screen, suspension alerts, review notices, flagged discrepancies. Her voice cracked. "They're saying my fellowship is terminated. They're contacting the ethics board. They want to audit everything I've ever submitted. Marina, they're going to tear apart my entire academic record. I'll lose my recommendation letters, my grants, my spot at Stanford, my future." I returned the phone. "That future was built on my work," I said softly. Her hands clenched. "You're jealous." I shook my head. I was tired. "You want to destroy me. I want my life back." Her cheeks streaked with fresh tears. "You have no idea what you've done." Behind me, Grandma spoke gently. "Sabrina, sweetheart, your sister didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself." Sabrina's face crumpled. "Stay out of it, Grandma." But Grandma stepped closer, eyes sharp with conviction. "Your sister's been overlooked long enough. It's time she stands tall even if it shakes everything you've built." Sabrina stared at her, stunned. Then she folded. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just folded. She sank to the floor, hugging her knees, breathing in jagged gasps. "I can't lose everything," she whispered, broken. "I don't know who I am without it." My heart twisted, not with guilt, but with grief. Because beneath all the perfection, Sabrina was a girl who had never learned to be someone without applause. "You're more than what you stole," I said, "but you have to face what you did." Her voice was a whisper. "Will you help me?" I crouched beside her, not close enough to be mistaken for forgiveness, but near enough to offer honesty. "I'll tell the truth," I said, "all of it, including my part, including yours. That's the only help I can give." She stared at her hands. "I hurt you. Many times," I said. "But this isn't about hurting you back, it's about ending something that shouldn't have begun." Footsteps thundered up the stairs. My father's voice bellowed, "Girls!" But Grandma stepped into the doorway, blocking him with surprising authority. "No," she said firmly. "Let them finish." I met Sabrina's gaze. "This ends today," I whispered. Her eyes glistened with fear. And something else. Acceptance. Maybe the beginnings of it. I stood and offered her a hand. After a long moment, she took it. And as she rose shakily to her feet, I realized the truth wasn't just tearing our family apart. It was forcing all of us to become something new. I could feel the shift in the air the moment Grandma stepped aside and let my father into the room. He entered like a storm in a pressed shirt, breathing hard jaw, clenched eyes, darting between Sabrina's tear-streaked face and my steady posture. Behind him, my mother hovered in the hallway, hands, trembling expression flickering between panic and denial. Christmas morning light poured over all of us, gentle and golden, a cruel contrast to the unraveling happening inside these walls. "What is going on?" my father demanded, though he already knew the answer. He knew the moment the first institutional email hit Sabrina's inbox. He knew when her fellowship suspension arrived. He knew when he heard her crying on the kitchen floor. He knew, but he was still hoping anyone would rewrite the truth for him. I didn't move. "We're talking. This isn't a conversation," he snapped. "This is a disaster." Sabrina wiped her cheeks. "Dad," he held up a hand. "No, not now. I don't want excuses. I want solutions." His eyes landed on me. "You. Fix this. I can't fix the truth." He took a step toward me, shoulders shaking with anger. "You could retract your claims." "I won't lie. You already have," he hissed. "For years you've acted like you were fine. Now suddenly you bring this up and sabotage your sister." "Sabotage," I whispered. "I protected my work," he scoffed. "Work? You're an undergraduate. Sabrina is a thief," Grandma said sharply. The room froze. My father turned toward her. "Mom, stay out of this." "No," she said firmly. "Not this time." My mother stepped in, then voice shaking. "Mom, please." Grandma lifted her chin. "You've coddled Sabrina into believing she doesn't have to face consequences." "Well, she does. And so do you." My father's face reddened. "What consequences? She's the victim here." "No," Grandma said. "Marina is." Silence. Sabrina's breath hitched. My mother pressed her palms together as if praying for the moment to dissolve. My father looked ready to erupt, but Grandma's voice carried the force of someone who had lived long enough to stop fearing the truth. "You raised 2 daughters," she said, "but you only celebrated one. And you built that celebration on stolen work." My father clenched his fists. "If you're implying Marina's claims are legitimate, I'm not implying she cut in. I'm acknowledging something you refuse to do." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "We don't have all the facts." "We have enough," Grandma said, gesturing to the stack of evidence on my desk. I read it. Every page. It's thorough, detailed, and damning. My father's gaze shot to me, full of disbelief and resentment. You let her read it, she asked, I said. And she listened. You should have come to us. I did, I whispered. Every time. You didn't hear me. My mother's eyes softened with something like guilt, but she quickly swallowed it, smoothing her robe as though straightening fabric could straighten the truth. Marina, sweetheart, I'm sure you're hurting, but this is extreme. Mom, I said softly, this didn't have to be extreme. It only became extreme because you ignored everything before it. A whimper slipped from Sabrina. When I turned, she looked impossibly young, her perfection cracking like porcelain. The girl who had always been untouchable was now shaking on the edge of a future she didn't understand. Marina, she whispered, please, just tell